What is going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here for your week 2 fantasy football stardom and situm, helping you win in fantasy football every single week. Again, you guys know how this works. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for fantasy football and NFL content. I do not give you the easy starts. I don't tell you to start Aaron Rodgers. I don't tell you to start Todd Gurley. I am the guy that tells you to start guys that are on the borderline. I make the tough decisions here on the bottom line view. I don't make the easy ones. So if you want to go somewhere else for the easy decisions, go to the easy experts. For me, I'm giving you the tough calls. Let's start off with the quarterback position. Starts of the week, Ben Roethlisberger. I know Roethlisberger had a terrible week last week. He was not very good. He threw multiple interceptions against the Cleveland Browns. First off, that was in a storm. Second of all, I do believe the Cleveland Browns defense is actually pretty decent this year, especially their pass rush with guys like Myles Garrett. Third, the Browns defense is better than the Chiefs, and they are at home this week as opposed to on the road. And the Kansas City Chiefs secondary got absolutely shredded against Phillip Rivers last week. Phillip Rivers was able to go up and down the field as much as he wanted and actually missed on a couple of big plays that they could have had in that game. And trust me, Travis Benjamin may not catch it, but a guy like Antonio Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster, he's going to execute. He's going to make the play. I think Roethlisberger is going to have a huge game here at home, the first start at home of the season, and I think he's the start of the week at quarterback. Phillip Rivers, I think, is going to be excellent. He was last week against the Chiefs in a losing effort. This week, I think it will be a winning effort against the Bills. I think early on, he's really going to just slice and dice this zone defense that the Bills do typically play. They don't have great linebackers. I think underneath, the Chargers should be able to just hit them like nonstop with under routes to Keenan Allen, everything across the middle of the field I think is going to be open. You don't really have to worry about a pass rush in Buffalo. I think that will be negated. So overall, I just see the Chargers pretty much trouncing the Bills in this game, and I think that means the Rivers has a really good game here. Jimmy Garoppolo, he needs a bounce back performance. He's playing the Detroit Lions. Sam Darnold last week was awesome against the Detroit Lions as a rookie in his first ever start. Jimmy Garoppolo has Kyle Shanahan at his disposal, one of the best game planners in football. He has done so well game planning against Matt Patricia defenses. Jimmy Garoppolo knows a little bit about a Matt Patricia defense being from New England. Yes, he doesn't have Marquise Goodwin, but I think Pierre Garçon, Dante Pettis, Matt Breida out of the backfield, George Kittle, who had a big week last week, those guys are going to be enough to slice this defense apart. And I think Garoppolo is going to have to be relied upon in this game if it does become a shootout against Matt Stafford. Alex Smith. Alex Smith was awesome last week. Kind of unexpectedly. I mean, I thought he was going to have a decent game, but he was very efficient and also very good for fantasy purposes. This week, I like him a lot against the Colts. We saw what Washington's offense has to offer. It's not going to score you a ton of points, but it's very efficient, and they are going to scheme ways to get their receivers open. Jay Gruden does a really good job of that. Their run game looks to be improved. Their offensive line is solid, and Alex Smith doesn't make too many mistakes. At the very least, he's going to be a solid start for you. He's not going to disappoint you, and at the top of his game, Alex Smith could give you a game-winning week against a Colts defense that is maybe the worst in the NFL. Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is playing the New Orleans Saints. We saw what Fitzpatrick did to them last week. I don't really think that's much of a fluke. I do believe that the Saints defense early on in the season does tend to struggle. I know this one is in New Orleans, but if the Saints are going to win this game, it's likely going to be that they're going to score a lot of points. So for Cleveland's sake and Tyrod's sake, he's going to have to play catch up here and throw for a lot of yards, throw for some touchdowns, and even run for some touchdowns and yards, as Fitzpatrick did in the game against the Saints last week. So Tyrod, probably in a comeback effort, is going to have to pass the ball. Quarterback sits. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, I just don't believe he's going to be doing it twice in a row, especially against a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champions. You saw what they did to Atlanta offense, and I think they're going to really slow down Fitzpatrick in this game. I could see Fitzpatrick having a couple interceptions, making some poor plays offensively, and I just, there would be that kind of urge to start him this week because of his effort last week. Just don't do it. Nick Foles. He was bad last week against Atlanta, and I know you saw the numbers that Drew Brees put up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. I'm just not convinced in Nick Foles. I don't think he's very good. He didn't play very well last week. He didn't play very well in the preseason. I think the Eagles are going to have to grind this one out to win and run the football and play some defense. Yes, I think the Eagles win this game by a decent margin, but I don't think that's because of Nick Foles in any facet. Derek Carr, I think he's going to struggle a little bit again against the Broncos. I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as it was against the Rams, but he is going to Denver, a tough place to play, where teams early in the season do specifically struggle because of basically the elevation and because they're out of shape and because it's a different level of football up there. And I think Derek Carr, he just looked off last week. His weapons weren't going. His offense really came to a halt in the second half. And the Broncos defense at times looked pretty dominant with Von Miller coming off the edge. You have to think that Derek Carr's tackles on the Oakland Raiders are some of the weakest parts of their offensive line. So I think Derek Carr is going to have moments of struggle, but also moments of promise. I just don't think that's worthy of a start this week. Matt Ryan, I just don't like Atlanta's offense at this point. Yes, they have all the skill in the world, but Steve Sarkisian can't punch it in within the 20-yard line in the red zone. Matt Ryan's not going to throw touchdowns, especially against Carolina, a very underrated defense, and I think they're going to slow down Atlanta's offense this week. And my big sit is Russell Wilson. This is a guy that's typically looked at as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. He is playing Chicago this week. Khalil Mack. You saw what Von Miller did to him and that offensive line last week. Now Khalil Mack comes in. The Bears defense is, in my opinion, better than the Broncos defense. The Bears are at home. That's a tough place to play on Monday night with a hype crowd. I just don't see it happening for Russell Wilson without Doug Baldwin at his side. The running back starts Tevin Coleman. I know that this isn't the greatest situation or matchup in the world for Tevin Coleman, but because Devonta Freeman is out, you have to start Tevin Coleman. He's going to be a machine. He's going to be the go-to guy, passing game, running game. He's going to get approximately 30 touches in this game because Devonta Freeman won't be there, and I think Atlanta's going to want to get him the football as much as possible. So that being said, Carolina's not a great matchup for Coleman, but you just have to start him, and he's going to be at least solid for you this week. The Washington Redskins running backs, they are playing the Colts. Thompson looked really good last week, and I think Adrian Peterson looked really good as well. Now, like I said last week, Adrian Peterson, how long is he going to, be able to withstand the punishment of the NFL season? I think he's going to be able to make it 2 weeks in a row. I think Thompson he's looked just as good as he did last year, and he's going to be able to just torch these linebackers on the Colts. So I really like the Redskins running backs this week to put up some fantasy points. Royce Freeman was a start last week. He was okay. That was one of the ones that, I was a little disappointed in from last week. But I think this week against the Raiders, you saw what Todd Gurley, the Rams, were able to do to this defense. I think late in the game, Royce Freeman's going to get the football. He's going to be able to run it for solid yardage. And I think when they're icing the game, the Broncos are, Royce Freeman's going to really chew away the clock, get some points for you. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the football a little bit more this week because I just think he didn't really get it as much as we expected last week. So I think Freeman is going to have not necessarily a bounce back performance, but a better performance than he did last. Carlos Hyde, just like Tyrod Taylor, I think this game is going to be a shootout in New Orleans. I don't think New Orleans is going to be able to break away as much as some people think. I think that will keep the option of the run game open for Carlos Hyde, and I think that's actually going to be part of the reason why the Browns stick around in this football game. So I like Carlos Hyde here in week number 2 against the Saints. And both the 49ers running backs. I think Morris might score a touchdown or two. BRIEDA is going to catch a lot of footballs and run it as well. So I like both of these guys against a weak Detroit front seven. The running back sits, the Green Bay running backs. I don't like any of them against the Vikings. The Vikings are the best team against running backs last year, and they were awesome last week. So don't expect a good performance from Jamal Williams, Ty Montgomery, or anybody from that backfield. Peyton Barber, just not a huge fan of the Bucs run game. The first week of the season didn't really do me any favors in that regard. I don't see it happening against the Eagles. They're one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Fletcher Cox looks like he's on his game from week number 1, and that offensive line is not going to be this defensive line very effectively in this game. The Jaguars running backs might be a little bit of a surprise to some people, but I think the issue with this is that Leonard Fournette is injured, and they're not sure if he's going to play. And if he does play, he's going to split carries with TJ Yeldon, and I don't think either of them are going to have great games against New England's front that I think will be focusing on taking away these guys in the backfield. Chris Carson does play a tough Bears front seven who did very well against the Packers run game last week, pretty much took it out of the game. I think this week they'll do the same and force Russell Wilson to beat them with limited targets. So I think that the Bears defense is just too solid for Carson to start this week. Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry was severely disappointing last week because Dion Lewis got a majority of the touches in that 100-hour game that they played. But Derrick Henry does play the Texans. I saw the Texans up close and personal more than anybody else this week because I am a Patriots fan, so I did watch that game basically every detail, every play. And Derrick Henry is not going to have a lot of success. The Patriots found it tough to run last week against the Texans front, especially with J.J. Watt back. DJ Reader is a beast. Jadeveon Clowney is awesome on the edge. So Derrick Henry is not going to be the guy. If you're going to start either of the Titans running backs, it's probably Dion Lewis. The wide receiver starts Allen Robinson. I think, yes, he had a decent game last week. I think he's going to really have a big game this week against Seattle secondary. No clear-cut, great number one corner, and I think Trubisky's going to have a better game than he did last week. Nelson Aguilar, I think, is going to really just catch a lot of footballs this week. He caught quite a few last week, but it was for limited yardage. I could see him getting to the end zone this week, maybe getting a little bit more yards per catch. Atlanta's defense significantly better than the one in Tampa Bay. Josh Gordon. I'm starting him this week if I have the chance, if my other receivers aren't the greatest, because he is now in the starting lineup. I think that Josh Gordon, as soon as he gets in that starting lineup, he's going to explode. If they play man-to-man coverage like they did last week, the Saints, Josh Gordon's going to torch it. He's going to find a way to get open and use his athleticism to his advantage. Emmanuel Sanders, he was awesome last week. He looks like his old self, his young self, I should say, and he is definitely Case Keenum's go-to guy, so you should start him again this week. Cooper Kupp did score a touchdown last week. I think he might as well this week as well against Arizona. Patrick Peterson will probably be falling around the fast Brandon Cooks around the field, opening up Cooper Kupp around the slot, who's a tough matchup in there for the Rams. Wide receiver sits. Randall Cobb never does well against the Vikings. Very good secondary, very good defense. I think the first week, yes, he played very well. Yes, he kind of came out of nowhere. This week, not going to do much. Chris Hogan against the Jaguars. Jaguars secondaries all world. I think Chris Hogan will be the one receiver other than Gronk that they try and take away. So I think that Chris Hogan is the guy that probably has the worst matchup of any of the receivers on the Patriots, whether that's Ramsey or Bouye. I think those two guys will be locked on him. Keelan Cole, on the opposite side of things, I think is probably going to draw Stephon Gilmore, who had a very solid week against DeAndre Hopkins last week. I don't think he should have too much of a problem with Keelan Cole. I also believe that the Jaguars are not going to want to lose this game first against the Patriots by putting the ball in their running backs' hands and trying to run the football first off. I don't see them passing the ball a lot, especially for big plays, so I think that Keelan Cole is a sit this week. Robbie Anderson, I've just not been impressed with Sam Darnold's deep ball or his ability to throw the ball deep and take a risk, and that's what Robbie Anderson's game is. Yes, he had a touchdown for a long touchdown last week, but it's mostly Quincy Enunwa who's really getting the reps. So I think, and the touches and the targets, Robbie Anderson is the go deep guy. And I just don't see him getting deep against actually pretty underrated Dolphin corners. And then the last sit at wide receiver is Jordy Nelson. He just looks old, wasn't able to get anything after the catch, wasn't able to win one-on-one matchups. He looks not very good this year, Jordy Nelson. So don't start him against a pretty solid secondary in Denver. My tight end sits, Trey Burton. Only one catch last week. I think he's going to have a big game this week. Seattle, not very good against the tight end position. And I just think he was on the field for so much last week, but wasn't able to really get his hands on the ball. I think that Trubisky's going to get after him early on and get him the football. I think Matt Nagy's going to make it a purpose of this game plan to get him the football early. So Trey Burton will be a great start. Don't sit him and definitely don't drop him. Evan Engram, you saw plays last week that were called back or for whatever reason didn't count. And Evan Engram had a really good game against the Jaguars in moments, but for whatever reason, it didn't show up on the stat sheet. I think this week it will against the Dallas Cowboys. They'll be very focused on OBJ, even focused on Sterling Shepard. I think Evan Ingram's the guy that benefits here. George Kittle was awesome last week for the 49ers. They don't really have a red zone threat this week against the Lions where they could score a lot of points. Kittle could put up multiple touchdowns this week. Jack Doyle had 8 catches last week in his first week. This week, Washington not very good against the slot or tight end position. I think Doyle will have a nice game against some of those weaker safeties on the team. And Jared Cook, yes, he had a breakout game last week. Yes, he was awesome last week. He does this every year. Hopefully this isn't a facade. Hopefully we see Jared Cook put 2 weeks in a row where he's good, and I think he will. The Broncos defense doesn't have great inside cover linebackers or safeties. I think Cook could have that advantage once again, and Gruden seems to like using him a lot, and Cook doesn't mind throwing him the ball. My tight end sits Disley from the Seahawks. I just think of this as a kind of a miracle, once in a lifetime sort of thing. I just wouldn't start him until we see more from him. OJ Howard, I just don't think that against Malcolm Jenkins is not a good matchup for OJ Howard. He can match his athleticism, he can press him, he can get physical with him. I just don't think OJ Howard is going to have a great game against Malcolm Jenkins in the Eagles defense. Austin SEFARIAN-Jenkins, he goes against the Patriots. I think he had a touchdown last year against the Patriots as a Jet, but I just don't see him doing a lot. Patrick Chung's very solid in coverage. Devin McCourty's very solid in coverage against the tight end position. SEFARIAN-Jenkins wasn't getting a lot going for the Jags last week. I don't expect that this week. Charles Clay of the Bills. We need to know who Josh Allen's going to throw to before we start this guy. He's playing the Chargers, where the Chargers' safety depth is really improved. It's gotten a lot better, especially with the rookie in there. And I think Clay might be shut out once again in catches. If not, he'll get a couple. So Clay overall, not starting him. Those are my starts and sits for week number 2 of the fantasy football season. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe for more. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Peace out.